This third financial cycle will push the whole world to this new system, and this is how to prepare. Now, nothing is forever except change and evolution. In order to handle the changes that come, you have to know where in the cycles we are, so you can know the right strategies for dealing with them. Now, cycles build on top of each other. They repeat over and over, and as we've already discussed in the previous two videos, they're reactionary, meaning that actions of one cycle push the actions of the next. So you have to understand that financial market cycles are influenced by two different other cycles: political, cultural, and social cycles, PSC, and technological cycles as well. Like winter, spring, summer, fall, the financial market cycles, they move in cycles. Now, if you're aware of this phenomenon, then you can better prepare your investments to reflect this reality. Understanding this is key to surviving these cycles, especially the bigger cycles or financial revolutions, as we're going to explain today. Now, financial markets, they ebb and flow. They go from bull to bear. And on a larger scale, the wealth of nations and their time in the spotlight as the world's superpower and reserve currency constantly shift from one to the next, at least when you view it zoomed out over a long enough period of time. Now, it's not much of a surprise that better educated people produce better societies that are more innovative, competitive, and productive. The increased information and education over the last 500 years has shifted wealth. It shifted power away from the agrarian economy, where land ownership was the main source of power. It shifted it to an industrial economy where capitalists that owned production capabilities had power. And now the shift is happening again. But this time it's shifting into a digital economy, digital things like data and information. And this is already becoming the most valuable thing. And this will drive the markets through the next cycle and will be the new source to gain wealth and power. Now, we're just now starting to move much deeper into the most intense phase of the economic winter season. It's another 80-year economic cycle, as we've been discussing, and with it comes a once-in-a-lifetime great reset of debt and financial asset bubbles and the emergence of a whole new economy, just as occurred back in the 1930s. Now, think of the advantages if you could have seen that great reset, the sale of a lifetime in financial assets, if you could have seen it coming back then. Well, today's economists, the heads of central banks and governments, seem to think that we can just be stable. We can just grow forever. No volatility, no inflation, no deflation, no more recessions. They seem to completely disregard the naturally oscillating dynamics of innovation and change. They think that the market is like a machine, that they can be built, it can be controlled, but it's not a mechanical machine. It's a biological, diverse, complex organism because it's driven by over 7.5 billion people and their irrational, ever-changing list of wants, needs, and desires. They live in a fairy tale world, never having run a business or real life. They're a product of the fourth turning, living on the past success of the generations that came before them. And it's the setbacks and the struggles that make us grow and enable and encourage progress, growth, and innovation. So let's dig in. All right, real quick, before we dig in, if you're new to the channel, my name is Mark Moss, and I make these videos because I want to change the way you think about money. Now, I know these are really big, scary, complex subjects, but I do my best to take them, break them down into very simple, easy to understand, and more importantly, actionable information so that you can have knowledge to take that action to save yourself, your friends, and your family. So if you like these topics and you'd love to help me just get this out to more people, you can do me a favor. Just click on that like button so the algorithm sends it out to more people. All right, now, like I said, these are big topics. I've done my best to try to cover them into small videos. I've broken them down into 3 videos. This is the third of the 3 video series. If you want to understand the whole picture and more importantly, what you need to be doing right now to be prepared as we move through this, then you may want to come to my free event where I'm going to put all this together, give you the actions that I'm personally taking. There's a link in the description down below. You can sign up for the free event if you want to come to that. I'd love to have you there. Like I said, it's a free event. You can click on that link down below. But either way, let's go ahead and just jump in. All right, now if you are just joining us on this video, this is the third video in a 3-part video series. It's a big subject. This should be a book. It should be 8-hour, 10-hour book. I've tried to do my best to make it very simple, break it down into 3 videos. We've covered 3 different revolutions that are happening in 3 different areas that are all converging together. 3 revolutionary cycles that are converging right now. And you have to understand all 3 of these. And you're on this video, you're probably just going to watch this video, but I'd highly recommend to go back and start at the beginning. You need to understand that political, social, and cultural cycles, political, social, and cultural revolutions which we're in the middle of 80-year revolution cycles within a 250-year revolution, drives technological revolutions because everything's reactionary. So the actions of this, the problems require solutions, which are found here in these technological revolutions. I break this down in that second video. There's been only a few technological revolutions. I'm not talking about technologies, but revolutions in the last 250 years, again, 250-year cycles. And then this then drive the financial cycles and revolutions. And so we're going to go through this today. It's going to make sense either way, but you might want to go back and watch number 1 and number 2 before we do. Anyway, but that's where we're at. But to understand these wealth cycles and how they move through these financial cycles, you have to zoom out, and we're looking at a bigger picture. I'm not going to tell you where the stock market's going to go tomorrow. We're looking at a much bigger shift because of the 250-year and 80-year revolution cycles that we're seeing in the PSC and in the technology. Now, wealth moves from nation to nation. It may be a surprise to you because these things happen over longer periods of time, but the United States has not always been the superpower of the world. It hasn't always been that way. As a matter of fact, it's shifted many times. We can see that in the 1400s, it was Portugal. Then it moved up to Spain, Netherlands, France, Britain, and of course, now the United States. If you look at these, the average time is about 100 years. Now, if you go back and watch video 1, you'll also understand that the life cycle, we're looking at the political, social, and cultural revolution cycle. There's 80-year cycles, which are regime change. And then there's 250-year cycles. And so we discussed how empires never really last more than 250 years. And in the middle of that, in their dominance, they get about 100 years of having that. So we're at the end of this stage as per history. And so that tells us that something new is coming. And again, like I said, we have these 250-year revolutionary cycles. I break all this down in video 1. But basically, we can chop these up into 3 pieces or 4 pieces or 6 or 8 or 10 pieces, but it doesn't change the dynamics of how it starts and ends. Like there's life and then there's death kind of a thing. Winter, spring, summer, fall. This is a 250-year revolutionary cycle. And it's broken down into 8 stages. And it goes from the outburst. This was the creation. And that's a reaction. So things got so bad that there was a revolution. And then we got an outburst of a new society, a new culture, a new state, whatever it may be, outburst. Then there's the conquest, the commerce, the affluence. Things start really going good. Of course, that affluence then allows people to spend more time building their intellect, which then leads to decadence. People aren't working. They have so much wealth, they don't know what to do with it. I'm sure this probably sounds familiar. Decadence, and then that leads to the decline. So we go to the decline and then eventually the collapse. If we put this over the United States on a timetable, 1776 was the birth of the United States, Declaration of Independence, etc. And it goes all around 250 years later, which brings us to right about now, somewhere between 2023, maybe up to 2026, somewhere in that time period. And I think to anybody paying attention, there's no doubt that we are in that process. Now, when we talk about wealth, it's important to understand that we're not talking about currency. We're not talking about money. And so we see in the United States that, well, we're the reserve currency of the world. We can just print trillions of dollars. And we definitely are, $8 trillion or so in the last year. The Biden administration is now proposing that we're running $6 trillion deficits. And if printing money just made people wealthy, then why not just print even more? But the truth is that currency, money, is not wealth. That's not wealth. What wealth is goods and services. If we were stuck on a deserted island or in the middle of the desert with no food, no water, no services, but we had $1 billion in a suitcase, it would do us absolutely no good. We need goods and services. And so really the measures of wealth are goods and services. And if we're looking at on a nation level, on a national level, we would look at like education and competitiveness. So we need that. We talked about that in the intro. Education and competitiveness are what builds the technology, the economic output, and the share of world trade. So it's goods and services, and the ability to go then trade those goods and services. That is what brings us wealth, not printing currency. Also military strength, that's been one of the big pieces throughout generations, throughout years. Financial center strength, and then ultimately having that reserve currency, which is both a blessing and a curse. Now, the cycle of money changes partly because we've changed what money is. So money used to be, well, for 5,000 years, money was gold. It was real asset. There was a cost of capital. It took me time, money, and resources to get that gold out of the ground. There was a premium applied to that. And it wasn't able to be artificially inflated. And so it worked as money for 5,000 years. However, today, our money is not gold. Our money is debt. So we live on a debt-based system. And so because of that, money is created through credit. So when you go get a loan for a car, auto, home, whatever, that money is created into the system. So it's a credit-based system, a debt-based system. We have to understand that credit is cyclical, all right? So there's two different phases of this. There's credit expansion, there's credit retraction, of course, right? Just like bulls and bears, just like ebbs and flows, just like spring and fall, right? So the money creation phase is where the debt spirals up. More debts issued, which allows people to go buy bigger cars and more fleets and bigger businesses and bigger houses and take more trips and all those things and spend more and more money on debt creation. However, at some point, typically that debt has to be paid back. And when that debt has to be paid back, then it starts to retract. It starts to spiral down just like it spiraled up. Debt's like leverage, right? So it can help you grow faster. Unfortunately, it can also help you unwind even faster. And when we study these debt cycles, we understand, again, just like everything in nature, like natural law, there's seasons. Nothing goes smooth forever. Instead, it constantly oscillates, ebbs and flows. And so there's these long-term debt cycles that typically last about 80 years. If you've been following along, 28 years times 3, 80 years times 3, 250, etc. And it's just very crazy how things move in these patterns. But we have these 80-year cycles, and this is the way that it basically moves through. So we started having hard money. Again, like I said, gold was money for 5,000 years, and it has all the properties of money: durable, portable, and scarce being one of those things, right? You can't just have an unlimited supply. It has to be scarce, and it can't be overproduced. And so that's why gold worked really well for 5,000 years. But what happened is gold was too big, it was too heavy, it wasn't easy to transport around, it wasn't easy to use for small denominations, so just put it in a bank. And then the bank gave us a new technology, and that was paper gold certificates, which was paper money. And the paper was claims on the hard money. So it said, I have this hard money in the bank, you can accept this claim. And eventually those paper claims actually became money, which is what most people think the dollars in your wallet are today. And then what happens once we have that paper money and that paper becomes money, then we have that debt-based system, and those paper claims on gold start to grow. We get more paper claims on gold than the gold that we have available. The debt grows even more. It starts spiraling up. The economy is booming, and the money supply grows along with it. The problem is they're artificially increasing that. All right. And as they're artificially increasing it, it comes with problems. And that problem is that the debt crisis comes next. So people realize, like, oh, shoot, they've printed way more paper currency than there are actual money or gold in the bank. I want to go get my gold, which is what happened through the 1920s in the United States. And then we got bank runs. Everybody went to the bank and said, just give me my money, give me my gold, here's your paper back. And too many people did that, and the banks were forced to then debase it. And what we saw in 1933, the banks actually said, sorry, you can't get your gold anymore. As a matter of fact, you can't even own gold anymore, give it all to us. And that's what happened then. And at that point, we got fiat money. Now, fiat means by decree. So that means this money is valuable because we tell you it is. Now, I learned when I was a kid, my dad taught me that something's only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. Value is all in the eye of the beholder. One man's trash, another man's treasure, etc. Everything has value because we say it does. However, not fiat money. Fiat money is by decree. That means the government tells you this has value. It wasn't found on the open market. And that fiat money is claims on money. And what happens is now the government can just tell you what money is, and they can print as much as they want. And of course they do. We've seen this happen over and over and over. And there's too much money. And what happens is the people start realizing this. The people start realizing that, shoot, prices are going up so fast, I better buy my goods today. We're seeing that right now today. The price of cars is going up so fast, I better buy my car today. Price of houses are going up so fast, I better buy my house today. The price of lumber has gone up so high, I better stockpile some of that today. But it's not really the prices of everything going up so fast. It's the dollar's losing value that fast. It's losing value in real time. And so people are abandoning that fiat money system and they're trying to find alternative stores of wealth. It could be gold, it could be stocks, it could be real estate, it could be Bitcoin. And their alternative stores of wealth are sought. And at that point, it's when the game has to start all over and we move into a new monetary system, just like we did 80 years ago. All right, now, as we go through these stages, we can see that it happens as we rack up the debt. That's always the case, right? We're racking up the debt and eventually that debt has to unwind. And we can see that we have racked up quite a bit of debt. As a matter of fact, Japan is taking the charge here, over 250% debt to GDP. So remember, what's real wealth? It's goods and services, it's economic output. That's the GDP. So they're 250% debt to GDP ratio. Greece, over 200%. Italy trying to get there as best as they can, 150%. But the US doesn't want to be left behind and they are rapidly going, they're up to 135% at this point. Now, per the Keynesian multiplier, when a nation gets over 90%, it's usually not a good sign. It's usually game over. India, which is probably the largest economy, largest population in the world, and a very fast growing economy, is trying to get there pretty quickly as well. And so all over the world, it doesn't really matter where you're at. The developed nations, the older developed nations having it the worst, have the most amount of debt. And of course, in the cycles, we know what comes next. Now, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with a debt crisis? Well, there's not a lot of options. There's really only four. There's four options. And so option number one is austerity. So what does that mean? It means living on a budget. That means what you and I would have to do if we had to sit down and have a hard conversation and go, shoot, my job is only bringing in this much, but we're spending this much. We need to cut these expenses. That's austerity. Living on a budget, cut your expenses, figure out a way to pay back that debt. Live under your means. Nobody wants that. That's way too hard. So the next option would be to default. They could default on the debt, but of course, governments can't really do that. It's not a good sign. So the third option would be wealth transfers. And this is something that's being done aggressively. Wealth transfers, taxes. Let's take from the rich. Let's try that. Let's take all their money. Problem is eventually you run out of that. So that doesn't work, that doesn't last. And so finally, the fourth option is devaluing or debasing the currency, which means, of course, inflation, just printing more. Let's print it away. Let's keep printing more. Now, out of these four, obviously the fourth option is the easiest. Number 1 and 2 don't really work at all. Number 3, wealth transfers. You can only take so much wealth from people before there's a serious problem, which we're in the 250-year revolution cycle, the PSE revolution cycle. Anyway, so there's fireworks coming. So of course, devaluing, debasing the currency is the option that every single country takes. Now, some countries can get away with it, like the United States can for a long time, like we showed you in some of those numbers before. Some nations can't. And we're seeing them blow up in real time. Of course, Venezuela, Argentina, Lebanon, they're all good examples of that happening right now. Now, to understand all of this, we have to know that big cycles last longer than a lifetime. And so a lot of the stuff doesn't make sense to you. And that's why I said in the beginning, I kind of showed you, 500 years. You have to zoom out so you can understand the bigger picture, so we can learn from the lessons of the past. All right. So we have to learn those lessons so we know where we're going. So we're kind of at this inflection point. If you've watched the 2 previous videos, you know this. All these cycles have added up and they're all converging right now. So we talked about the PSE, political, social, cultural cycle. And in these 80-year cycles, as we're talking about right now, these credit-based cycles, in the 80-year cycle, there's this populist uprising and there's regime change. And I laid that out. I showed you the different regime changes. I showed you the amount of populist uprising that we have going on right now. Division and tensions get very high. And of course, even if you're not paying attention to this, you know this. The tension is so thick you can cut it with a knife. Division all over the world. It's getting stronger and stronger and stronger, which shows us that revolution cycle is here. 384-year cycle is equal to 252-year cycle. And that's where we're at. And now this potentially leads to a civil war. I don't think that the future is based off of guns and nukes. It's more information and money, but it's potentially into a civil war, and it's that big. But we are definitely at this inflection point. Something has to give. We know this. And I think, knowing that there's 4 options for getting ourselves out of debt, and really there's only one viable option, only one option that they're going to choose, as opposed to being forced into the other ones. Eventually, they'll be forced to default, but right now there's only one option that they want to choose. And so knowing that, and knowing that late stage governments only print money, then you need to understand, as I'm sure you're probably well aware by now, that there's real dangers in holding cash. And so most times people are focused on investing and they're thinking about assets and they're thinking about asset risk. Is this asset too risky? Should I buy real estate right now? Is it too risky to buy real estate? Should I buy Bitcoin? Is it too risky? And instead of just asset risk, people need to be thinking about currency risk. Do you want to be holding cash? Now, Ray Dalio has been coming out all over saying cash is trash. Don't hold cash. He doesn't want it. And so think about not just asset risk, but also think about currency risk, because we know what's inevitable as we progress through this. Now, how does this transition? Where does this new cycle start? Well, something has to give. Obviously, this fiat money system is at its breaking point. When you play a game, if you and I were playing a board game of, I don't know, whatever, Scrabble, you're making moves, and at some point you're out of moves. And at that point when you're out of moves, what do? Well, you reset the game, the great reset. That's kind of where we're at. We're at that point, we're out of moves. Interest rates are at 0 or negative across most of the world. Debt is sky high, as we've already looked at. Tensions are high. We're at this 250-year revolutionary cycle. We're at an 80-year regime change cycle. We have the technology cycle hitting right now as well. And something has to change. There's a new system. 80 years ago, we got ushered into a new system. 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement, which is when the whole world went onto a single monetary standard known as the Bretton Woods Agreement. It was basically the dollar would be backed by gold and the whole world would be pegged to the dollar. Well, now, this year, we have the IMF calling for a Bretton Woods 2 moment. So remember what Bretton Woods 1 was. The whole world changed its monetary system. 80 years later, the world's calling for the exact same thing. A change to the entire global monetary system, a Bretton Woods 2 moment. And the United States needs to get rid of the reserve currency status. Other nations want the reserve currency status to change as well. And so nations are calling out for it. I believe it's in the best interest of the United States to lose it as well. And something's going to change. China doesn't want it. And it's better to have a neutral reserve asset. This is actually what the original intention was of the original Bretton Woods Agreement, to have this Bancor system that had this neutral reserve asset. And the IMF has them, their SDR, special drawing rights. We've seen just in the last several months that they're starting to ramp that up. $650 billion worth of SDRs to go out there, not a small number. And I believe that this is going to be their attempt to have this new system developed. When I say their attempt, there's going to be a power struggle, right? We're in this revolutionary cycle, and you have to understand the other two to have an idea of where this is going to go. If you're only looking at this on its own, it doesn't give you the full, complete picture. All right. Now, before we get to that, we need to go back to understand that political, social, cultural, revolutionary cycles. What is it that's driving the revolution? Revolutions are driven by a spark. Revolutions end in the opposite fashion. The world is shifting to centralization, shifting to globalization. I broke down why the world is rejecting that, how the world is rejecting that, and where I think the next revolution will go. So when you understand that, and then you understand the technological revolution that we're in right now, I think it gives you a better picture of which way this breaks. Now, if you're only looking at this here, you're not going to have the full picture. So go back and watch those other videos. All right. Now, so the IMF is calling for this. The World Economic Forum is calling for 2030 agenda. You'll own nothing, you'll be happy. The IMF wants to have digital SDRs, and they want to be able to control you with their money. More centralization, more globalization. But in this revolutionary cycle, we want decentralization. We want power back to the people. We want a ground-up approach. And so what are the other reserve options then? Well, there's a lot of people talking about a return to the gold standard. And maybe we add up all the money in the world, add up all the gold in the world, we divide it by, a 10% ratio, a 50% ratio, we come up with a new gold price, 20, 30, 50, $100,000 an ounce of gold, potentially. The problem with gold is that it requires centralization, right? That's what happened to gold in the first place. It's so big, it's so heavy that it ends up in the banks, and we end up with paper gold certificates. And my favorite quote is that centralization always leads to manipulation. And so gold is always going to require that centralization. It's always going to require trust. It's always going to require trust in a centrally controlled entity. And if you understand the political, social, cultural revolution that we're going into, that is what we're trying to get away from. That trust cannot be given any longer And at the same time, we don't need to because there's a brand new technology that enables us to not have to trust organizations. It's fascinating to see how these things line up. So do we want a new centrally controlled system? The one that has proven not to work? Or do we want a decentralized system, right? That's what I said, the revolutions end opposite. They're reactionary. And so is there a case for Bitcoin? Having a decentralized currency, something that cannot be controlled by anybody. And not only can it not be controlled, it doesn't even have governance that could then change it and control it. Instead, it's just a fixed set of rules that everybody has to abide by, like a true scarce asset, true scarcity. Mises from the Austrian School of Economics said, in economics, there's no such thing as a constant because everything's constantly changing. The amount of oil, the technology to get the oil out of the ground, the prices, real estate, everything's always changing until now. So Bitcoin has a fixed supply. It could become the first constant in economics. Now, like I said, if you look at this on its own, you might think that's crazy. But if you understand that there's 3 cycles converging right now, 80-year cycles building into 250-year revolutionary cycles, political, social, cultural, at the same time as there's a brand new technological revolution that's giving us the technology that the PSE revolution needs. And at the same time that the financial revolutions are here. So all 3 are coming to a head right now. The political and social structures, they're gonna change. The world as we know it is changing. I believe that it breaks from the globalization, centralization route to a more bottom-up approach. Organizations, businesses, everything is going to change that way. And that is going to push the technological revolution. So we have the technology here, the revolution has started, and I believe that these social structures are going to push the technological revolutions, and then that's going to push into the new monetary system. It has to change. It is going to change. And which way is it going to go? Well, if you follow this trail down, I think it kind of paints a picture. As I said before, revolutions end opposite. So the way that businesses and orgs are formed will change. So the 250 years ago, 250-year revolutions, 250 years ago was the Industrial Revolution, which led towards centralization. It brought people from the decentralized farms and cottage industry into factories, into cities, into giant corporations. And it led to that. All right. But the way that will be reversed and now will push people back into a decentralized way. So the way that business orgs are formed is going to change. It's going to be a bottom up. It's a network revolution, directly decentralized to the people and moving back up. Still global in a sense where everybody's communicating, everybody's doing free trade. But instead of all being centrally controlled, it's more of a decentralized approach. And this, like I said, is going to impact our technology, right? So now we have a technology that's specifically designed for decentralization, for not having to trust people, trustless. It's permissionless. 2 billion adults in the world can't join the financial system because they can't get permission. Out of 7 billion people, 2 billion people can't get permission to join the financial system. That's not inclusion. It never will be. No amount of CBDCs from the central bank will solve that because it's permission. So we need something that's permissionless. It's borderless, it's open, right? And this, like I said, is what's going to drive the new monetary system. Now, if we go back to the first video, cycle number 1, we understand that there's a natural evolution of human progress to freedom, to affluence. And so the people at the end of the day are always going to choose to have the freedom to trade as they see fit. So you see in Venezuela where the currency is worthless and people don't use it. They'd rather trade water for batteries. They have the freedom to choose what they see as money. Now, this is big and scary. When you add all these things, these 3 things up, you see that there's massive change on the horizon. It's coming fast. So what are we going to do? How do we survive and we thrive this? Well, first of all, it's going to be a bumpy road. I'm just going to tell you that right now. We don't know every single twist and turn. We can see it over a long enough lens. So the first thing is we have to be prepared. We need to be prepared to, 1, pay attention, and we have to be prepared to kind of move in and out as this ebbs and flows. But the couple things that I'm doing, and this is big in general, is 1, you need to make as much money as you can right now while you can. I have this, so make as much money as you can while you can, because things are still relatively good right now. But as this revolution plays out, these 3 revolutions converge, it's going to get bumpy, right? We're going into the winter season. Now, out of the winter season comes the spring, right? So there is hope on the other side, but there's going to be trouble in between. And so make as much money as you can while you can, and then keep as much as you can. I don't believe now is the time to be going out and buying all the frivolous things. As a matter of fact, for myself and my family personally, we left California to go to Puerto Rico so I could keep more of what I'm making because I believe that that is that important. I moved to do that. Also, learn new skills, learn high-paying skills that can be done from anywhere. The world is going global and you need the ability to move. Different parts of the world are going to react differently to this. And so you need to be able to pick up and move. I'm making a video to you and I could be anywhere in the world. I moved my office from California to Puerto Rico and it doesn't skip a beat. So learn high-paying skills. High-paying skills are typically those around sales and marketing, the closest to the monetary supply. And then shift your thinking away from currency and focus on purchasing power. So stop thinking about everything in terms of dollars. My house is this many dollars. My gold is this many dollars. Instead, think about it in terms of purchasing power. The reason why is because in Weimar Germany, as the currency hyperinflated, everyone thought they were getting rich. Oh my gosh, my house has never been worth so much. Gold has never been worth so much. My assets have never been worth so much. It's a bubble. I'm gonna sell now. I'm gonna cash out now before the prices drop. What they didn't realize, it was the currency that was blowing up. And at the end of the day, they were left stuck holding a bunch of worthless paper and they had no assets. So start thinking about things in purchasing power and stop thinking about money. Now, historically, the biggest wealth gaps, the nations with the biggest wealth gaps, the nations with the biggest debts, and have the farthest to fall. The bigger they are, the farther they fall. And those ones have the most conflicts. And so you want to be aware of that where you're at. That's why I said have the ability to move around. It could be out of the city into the suburbs. It could be from one state to another. It could be from one country to another. It depends on where you're at. If in doubt, get out while it's still good. Now, this is important because there's several countries now that are not allowing you to go out. I'm actually on my way to a conference and several of my friends in other countries are not able to attend because their countries won't let them out. I can't think of any good reason why a country wouldn't let you out, but it's happening right now. And if you don't think it can't happen to you, take another look because it's happening right now. So get out while you can, but it's not just for you. Think about it in terms of your money. So the late stages of an empire as they're crumbling, one of the last things they do is impose capital control laws. Capital control means they control the capital. They don't let you take that capital out. And so as I was growing up, I had friends that came over from oppressive regimes and their parents, their families had to come broke, penniless, because they couldn't get their wealth out. Capital controls. So think about getting yourself out. Think about getting your money out, getting it out of the system somewhere that you can control. And that's it. That kind of wraps up the third financial cycles. As I said, there was 2 previous cycles. If you haven't watched those, go back and watch them. We're going to link them on the end screen. Watch those cycles because it really puts the picture together. All right, now this was a big topic, a deep topic. I'm going to put all this together and give you more actionable insights. I know this wasn't a lot, but I'm trying to keep it as short and simple as I can. If you want to join me for that, I'm having a free event. There's a link in the description down below. I'm going to break this down and give you more actionable information based off of that. Other than that, hopefully it sparks some questions. So ask them. Drop the questions down below. I'd love to have those conversations with you down there. Leave me comments. Of course, give me a thumbs up on this video. Been working hard putting these together. These 3 videos is a lot of content. It's a decade. It's a dozen years of research that I've put together. So give me a thumbs up. I think I deserve it. But if not, whatever. Give me a thumbs down. Either way, I want to know. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. And that's it. To your success. I'm out.